Now, I'm pleased to introduce our speakers today. Michael Cross, PhD, is the Senior Manager of Solutions Marketing for DirectWorks. The market analysis you'll see in the presentation today comes from his extensive training and research and analysis, coupled with more than 20 years of software experience. Greg Anderson is the President of DirectWorks. The insights that he brings to today's webinar come from his 25 years of experience in manufacturing, enterprise software, strategic sourcing, and supply chain operations. And with that, I'll hand it over to Michael. Michael Cross.
Thank you, Joe. Today we're going to talk about the state of direct material sourcing, and we're going to begin by talking about the methodology. We've conducted an awful lot of market research, and we're going to walk you through really how we put together this webinar. And as you will see, that there's a great deal of market information that was synthesized and really helps paint a clear picture today. This is our methodology. We conducted 2 market research projects in the first quarter of 2013. We'll talk about those in a minute. And if you yourself participated in a market research study, you probably participated in it for this particular webinar, because there just isn't a whole lot of research going on out there in the marketplace. As many of you know, DirectWorks only serves the manufacturing marketplace. Therefore, we're having discussions with manufacturers every day, clients, prospects, other players in the field. We also have lots of discussions with the consultants who are serving either the sourcing industry or the manufacturing industry. Finally, on an ongoing basis, we do an analysis of environmental factors and trends, and we try to pull all 4 sources together to really create the state of the industry as it stands in the first quarter of 2013. A little bit more on the market research I talked about. There were 2 projects completed in the first quarter, 253 total interviews with sourcing professionals. All were manufacturers, many global, and they skewed towards the $1 billion and above mark. We had 2 separate questionnaires, executive level questionnaires and manager level questionnaires, and we got a lot of good, vivid detail that was both quantitative and qualitative in nature. I have a challenge for the audience as you're going through and listening to the webinar. Whenever I attend a webinar, I always think about how am I going to get the most out of this, and how do I put things into action after the webinar is over? And I try to think about, there's the before and then there's the after, and what's going to inspire my after actions? Well, I think one of the things all audience members should be looking for is sophistication. Listen for how other manufacturers may be doing the same things that you are, but they're a little more sophisticated in their approach. And as we get to different points of the presentation, we'll stop and we'll point out differences in sophistication, because a lot of the concepts are the same. It's really how you attack them that makes the difference. So let's talk about the state of the industry. The first thing I like to do when I put together a state of the industry is go back for the last 5 years and look for the one biggest driver that shaped the industry, that had tremendous impact both on the buyers and the sellers. And there's no question, this was easy for manufacturing. The global recession of 2008 is the single biggest force. It has caused manufacturers to place much more emphasis on profitability. All right? They also, because they knew that they're in stiff competition, consumers and companies just came from what I would call a profitable era into a recession era, that they're looking for new products. They're looking for ways to jump out of the doldrums. And companies need to improve their NPI success rate. To meet the goals of 1 and 2 here, pretty much everyone came to realize we needed to stop working in silos. We need better coordination. Coordinations within our own company, say between engineering and sourcing, and then better coordination with suppliers. Also, clearly in the last 5 years, there's been a tremendous increase in risk. There's more risk mitigation factors and risk mitigation projects than ever before. And I think this one last bullet kind of sums up, if I'm in the sourcing department, how things have changed. Every day I come to work, I have to focus on hitting my target margin while preserving quality. And we're going to talk about that change in the paradigm now. Here's the framework we're going to use, and it's a trade-off framework. All right, and there's three elements on the screen right now, and we're proposing that to get ahead, you really need to understand the trade-offs and balance between total cost, supply risk, and the amount of time you spend sourcing. Obviously, you know the trade-off triangle. You know that you can hold one, two of these factors constant, but the other one moves in the opposite direction. So if you want the best total cost and the lower supplier risk, well, you're probably going to have to spend a lot of time to accomplish that. Or if you want to shrink your time, you're going to have to give up total cost or risk management. Now, a lot of people out there are probably saying, well, what the heck did he do with quality? Quality's always been on the triangle. Well, quality is a given now. This is one of the big changes over the last decade. Businesses and consumers tasted the good, all right? And they've come to realize that they can get quality at a low price. And that's the new standard, all right? There are not a lot of companies out there, or a lot of buyers out there that are willing to trade quality to pay a cheaper price. Now, before we dive into more details, we want to caution you that not everyone has jumped on this triangle, this bandwagon of the elements we're talking about here. There are still laggards. In particular, there are still companies out there that only care about price. They're in the manufacturing business, they're sourcing direct materials, but they only care about price, and they're willing to give up everything else. That's about 1/4 of the market, and it is shrinking. We provided some questions to the marketplace. We had them rate themselves on a scale from price to value, say it's 1 to 10. Half of the marketplace are at the 8, 9s, and 10s. They're saying, no, it's value every time. 1/4 of the marketplace is down there at 1, 2s, 3s, maybe 4s. You know, it's all about price. There are some people that are still 50-50, 60-40, but they're moving in the value direction. So there are laggards out there. Now, a word of caution, I know this is going to sound a little bit weird, but if you're working for a laggard company, I'm not sure this webinar is going to help you much. I mean, all you really can do is try to inspire some senior executive is to change the culture of your company, because this is a cultural phenomena if you're still not buying into it's more about value, not just about price. So now I'm going to turn it over to Greg, who's going to go into more detail about the elements.
Thank you, Michael, and I know all of you on this webinar now appreciate Michael's enthusiasm for this as much as I do. It's great to have him and his research here with us at DirectWorks, and thank you all for joining us today. Using the framework that Michael laid out here, I want to first look at total cost and some of the findings that came through in the studies that were done. I want to level set on what do we mean by total cost first, because there's a lot of different definitions out there for total cost. We define it simply as the cost to purchase and deliver the parts to the production operation, start, stop. It's not just the piece price that you pay, but it's also the associated costs of the supply chain required to deliver those parts. You have to account for additional costs such as transportation, duties, tariffs, etc., and so on, the cost of carrying inventory to understand your true total costs. So here's some of the current challenges and opportunities around total cost that came out in the market research. Commodity volatility, #1 challenge. And nobody thinks this is going to get better anytime soon. I wish I could tell you it is, but everything we read and look at says that commodity volatility is here to stay. On one hand, you have a commodity like steel, steel billets in particular, a steady price decline over the last 12 months. But then when you look at different base metals such as aluminum, copper, and platinum, a lot that go into manufacturing operations, those are all on the rise again. So it seems like we're in a new era, and that era is going to be marked by long-term systemic volatility of commodities. And so the new benchmark out there for sourcing organizations is how well they manage spend relative to market prices and their competitors. Other concerns, rising labor and fuel costs have people rethinking their direct material supply chain. I know I just read something last night where the the amount of transportation costs related to fuel is now 37% when it used to be 26% only 4 years ago. So fuel costs are going up, rising labor costs. When you look at the wage gap in emerging regions such as China, it's shrinking. The labor advantage is going away. So you have to ask yourself, is that the right place to be sourcing our direct materials? You take that development in the labor rates, combine that with currency concerns, inventory issues, all of those have manufacturers really evaluating where is the best place to source our direct materials. So given those challenges, it's not too surprising when you find that people felt the number one opportunity is improving the cost transparency in their direct materials. So a deeper and more sophisticated, there's that word, sophisticated understanding of total cost is really essential to select the best region and the best suppliers for your direct materials.
Yeah, and Greg, one of the things that really came out in the qualitative work was, there were 3 gentlemen on one particular focus call, and they were talking about how they would check their commodities in the old days every 3 or 6 months and revisit planning for them. Now they're doing it weekly, all right? They're doing it weekly, and they need more transparency. They need faster information. It's just gotten so much more complicated. If your tracking doesn't get more sophisticated, then you're going to fall behind.
Great. All right, let's move to the next dimension in this triangle, supply risk. Our research indicates manufacturers are concerned about their suppliers. Why? The primary reason is when you look at supply chains today, vertical integration has really gone away by and large. Most manufacturers now are really systems integrators where they have a virtual supply chain of third-party people providing all their parts, and they're just assembling the final assembly of the products. So you're more dependent than ever on the performance of your direct material suppliers, and they can make or break you. When people talk about risk, and we survey these folks, the risks were multidimensional. The first one that 75% of people worry about is capacity risk, particularly in industries like aerospace and defense where production's ramping up. The big question is, do your suppliers have the capacity to keep pace with the demand that you expect to generate? We've observed several of our customers proactively going out and engaging their suppliers with surveys to collect information on capacity and rate readiness to make sure that they're not at risk if they increase production by any measurable amount. Second highest supply risk item was supplier capability. Manufacturers want suppliers who have the knowledge, equipment, and processes to produce what they need today and as their products evolve. Michael talked about an increase in new product introductions. That's happening everywhere. And you need to have suppliers who can make that next move with you as you shift your product strategies. So assessing those supplier capabilities, unfortunately, often happens a little too late in the process, after design changes are made and they're locked in, and the next thing you do is have them scrambling to find alternative suppliers. Compliance requirements are also another concern. These seem to just be an additives type of an environment. So there's the old ones, RoHS, REACH, ITAR if you're in the defense industry. But the new one on the horizon is conflict minerals. We'll touch on that some more. But the key here is having a game plan for monitoring and reporting on the compliance across your supply chain. It's essential to have that. The final risk in supply risk is geopolitical. And a couple examples really illustrate this risk better than I can talk about it. If you think back to 2011 and the tsunami that hit Japan, it caused manufacturing impacts well beyond the shores of Japan. Because the country produces over 60% of the silicon for semiconductor chips, global prices for memory components went up 20%, an immediate spike of 20%. A number of auto plants all around the world were forced to halt production because they couldn't get key paints that they needed to paint their vehicles because some of the components in the paint were coming out of Japan and were hung up. Computer chips was another place where shortages happen. On the human rights front, you've got to be conscious of that. Everybody's seen Apple and Foxconn in the news enough, and recently HP just imposed some new employment limits on their Chinese suppliers over concerns of labor abuses with temporary and student workers that they use during peak production periods. These are real risks, and they're risks of reputation, and they can have an impact not only on your cost but also on your top line if you lose business because of bad publicity. So they have to be factored into your sourcing decisions.
And the research showed, and it was hard to quantify this, but it was very clear from the qualitative work, is that the reason for these worries being so high is manufacturers are expecting production booms in the next 5 years. They believe we are going to come out of this economy level that we're at. We're not in a recession technically, not sure where we're at, but they believe they're going to have production booms, and they're trying to figure out, well, who's going to be able to support me? Where am I going to get the capacity? And what do I have to do about this conflict minerals thing, which has the potential to knock suppliers right out of their list?
Thank you, Michael. All right, the third element in our triangle here is time spent sourcing. So Michael touched on this, and this triangle framework is something that my VP of R&D likes to talk to me about all the time. It's about scope, it's about time, and it's about resources, right? Here it's not that far off, right? You can set two of these in, you can lock two in, but the other is going to be a function of those two. So you want to be really good at optimizing total cost of direct materials. You want to be really good at managing supply risk. Well, you've got to have more time for sourcing. I doubt that anybody, though, that's participating in this webinar today can go ask for more people to create that time. Manufacturing organizations are lean by nature, and you live and die by productivity. So unfortunately, it creates an environment where you begin to trade off taking a really good total cost sourcing approach and really managing supply risk well because you don't have the time and the resources to do it right. So this is a concern for people. They know they need to up their game, but they don't have the resources or the time to do it. The teams the people that answer the survey, they're under pressure. Got to get the products to market on time. Have to hit the target cost and hit those margins that Michael alluded to earlier. Have to find the best suppliers. But they're frustrated because they don't have tools and time and information that they need to really do their job as well as they like to. So the result is frustration and a direct material supply chain that's really not optimized for cost or for risk. Michael, a little bit more here on the study.
Yeah. I can't tell you, people on the phone, how many times a senior executive of a manufacturer said, what can be done to make my people be more strategic? They're doing manual labor. They're chasing information that's well below their pay level. And I've trained them, I've given them the right process, but they're just tied up and they can't be strategic. So we drilled down on this topic, and we had a whole section focus on the tools that they're using. So tell us, what tools are you using today for your direct material sourcing? Over half the marketplace, as much as 60%, one of their predominant tools was simply email and spreadsheets. They create spreadsheets, templates, and they'd be blasting out all these emails, then have to receive them, put them back together, and it's a nightmare. 30% have developed homegrown systems that complement that to try to automate some of that. About 1/3 simply turn to their ERP module, and they're also looking for a complement to the email and spreadsheets. Again, integration. Surprisingly, only 11% have bought best-of-breed software for direct material sourcing. And part of the reason is many people have been held back from buying direct material sourcing software because they have an indirect software tool. And they were told, well, let's see if this will work for you first. And that tool is not working. And you look at the satisfaction levels for the tools that they are using, only 16% are very satisfied, 30% are satisfied, 37% are satisfied. That's 53%. That's an awful number. An awful number. Numbers should be up in the 80s. You have 5% very dissatisfied, 26% dissatisfied. Clearly the tools are not working, and this is an improvement opportunity for every company. Now, on the plus side, companies have reported a lot of progress in key areas over the last 3 to 5 years. And we wanted to highlight some of the things they've done that really given them, what I would say, an advantage over people that haven't really focused on improving processes. And you can notice that a lot of these things here aren't technology. These truly are processes. The first one is people realized that sourcing and engineering needed to work better together. All right, sourcing had to get involved early in the process. They had to help get suppliers involved with engineering designs, and together they could produce a better product at a better cost. 78% of people in that first quarter survey say that sourcing and engineering have a strong relationship, and that's a tremendous sign. 75% say they're very comfortable working with suppliers in emerging markets. They're not scared of it. A lot of them have hired staff in market. A lot of them, this is a strategic play. They are in market so they can sell their products in market. So they've gotten very comfortable with the cultures in doing business. Sustainability issues. We were wondering if that would become a bottleneck, a barrier, a compliance issue. People said it's really not much of an impact. They're very comfortable with it. And one process change that I think has made the biggest difference, they've invested heavily in cross-functional staff training. So you're not just trained on your sourcing job, or you're not just giving negotiation training or collaboration training. You now learn how the engineer views it, how the supplier views it, and you get cross-functional training so you can see how all the pieces go together. And that has really enabled a lot of the process change, Greg. All right, now we're going to kind of transition and go a little bit deeper into the concerns and then add some recommendations. So we're going to kind of take the triangle that we were talking about, the trade-off triangle, and we're going to break it down to more specific issues. And for this webinar, we've identified 5 of the highest priority issues. 2 at the top is cost visibility and supplier relationships. They are clearly the most important. Also, high priority is outsourcing and reshoring and efficient sourcing. And a growing priority, and to be honest, this would be higher if it impacted more companies, but not every manufacturer is impacted by conflict minerals. That's conflict minerals. And even though, one of the things I'll tell you right now about conflict minerals, be careful, because even if it doesn't apply to you today, it could very well apply to you next year. So really follow what's going on here. So I'm going to turn it over to Greg. He's going to start with cost visibility, and we're going to drill down on each of these buckets.
Great. Okay, I love using this graphic because it illustrates the point about total cost very well. There's many elements that comprise total cost, and you would go crazy trying to collect every one of these in order to make the right sourcing decision. The secret here is understanding which of these elements matter the most to your supply chain and to your cost structure, and to focus on those. We've got a framework here where we're talking about concerns and recommendations. This is something you'll see through this segment of the webinar, and I'll roll right into it here. So we just showed you that pie with the and discussed the problem of too many cost factors. We say, hey, focus on the most critical ones. Well, how do you determine what are the most critical factors? It requires a sophisticated approach. Some leading manufacturers are actually using statistical methods such as regression analysis to identify the most impactful cost factors. And that takes them and narrows that pie down to the key elements that really affect their costs, and that's where they focus. At the other end of the spectrum, there's a concern about having too narrow an analysis. This happens because sourcing teams can't put together the whole cost picture on their own. Here we recommend engaging other functions to help fill in the blanks on your key cost drivers. For example, finance can help quantify the cost impact on the business of an additional inventory amount that's required to support a longer lead time associated with an offshore supplier. You have to understand what that inventory impact is and what the true cost of that is before you take something and move it to an offshore supplier. You're going to have to carry more inventory. It's a mathematics certainty, but you need to know and you need to have access to resources who can help you identify and quantify that cost. Go to finance. Next concern that people have brought up are supplier objections. We're trying to create visibility into total cost by asking our suppliers to complete a more detailed cost breakdown, but they're rebuffing us on that. They're refusing to complete it, and it's hindering our ability to understand the cost drivers. What we recommend there, and we do this with several of our customers when we get them rolling, is start with a less detailed quoting template for your early rounds. Don't ask for such detail. And then once you have the initial pricing, you can shortlist it. And when you get to the shortlist, you tell them, hey, you're in competition for this business now. We need more detail, though, to make the right decision. At that point, if they're unwilling to provide the information, tell them it's a condition for remaining in consideration for the business. And if they don't provide it, they're out. That's what our customers do, and it works. That's what happens to us sometimes, and it works. So the last concern that's on here, it comes back to time again. I don't have the time to do this meaningful analysis of total cost. So we've seen customers and most manufacturers have some sort of Six Sigma or Lean program. Get those resources and help them map out your process. Understand where you're spending the time. Find the waste in your sourcing processes. Then attack those time-consuming buckets of waste with leaner processes and enabling technology. One of our customers did this recently, and they benchmarked their sourcing process. They leaned it up, and they enabled it with technology, and they found that they had a 50% reduction in the amount of time required to quote a part. 50% reduction.
Per part.
Per part. Yep. So streamlining the direct material sourcing process creates capacity for people to be more strategic. You can't get more people, why not create more capacity for them? So if you can do that, they can be more strategic, they can understand total cost, they can spend the time making the best sourcing decisions for your business. Okay, the next concern is around supplier relationships. And the very first one here is having too many suppliers to manage. It's a big concern. Here we recommend rationalizing suppliers wherever possible and segmenting them into partners, preferred, and other categories based on their relative importance to your business. That could be the amount of spend you have with them, but it also could be how critical their components or parts that they're supplying are to your end products. I can tell you this, your biggest suppliers have account managers out there whose job it is to know your business inside and out. What we recommend is turning that around and applying the same sort of discipline to your suppliers and be as well-versed in their business and understand them well, especially the ones who are strategic partners and preferred suppliers. We're seeing more and more manufacturers working with key partners to bring innovation to their business. Okay, so when I was at GE and we were vertically integrated, the components that I made at my plant, I was always being asked to innovate because I was part of the vertical integrated supply chain. Well, now you just have to take that out to your suppliers. Have them be a source of innovation. A good example here, Procter & Gamble's gone out, publicly stated the expectation that 50% of their innovation ideas from outside their company are going to be coming from suppliers. Okay, that's a bold move, and that's the right kind of thing to do. Second concern here under supplier relationships is the different wants and needs that suppliers have. Your partners, your preferred suppliers understand their importance to your business, and they're looking for more than just a long-term contract and an arm's length relationship. And here you can take advantage of understanding what they need, explore what's important to them, and negotiate win-win arrangements with them. For example, some suppliers may be strapped and have a poor cash flow. They may want better payment terms, and those may be very important to them. So they may be willing to trade off a discount or provide something to you in return for, say, net 30 terms. Seek these opportunities, create value for both parties, and that way everybody feels good about it. You create win-wins with your most strategic suppliers. A deeper understanding of suppliers is required. People say, wow, we need to know more about them. Here we recommend maintaining an up-to-date view into your suppliers. Understand what their capacity is. How much of their capacity do you represent? Do they have the ability to add capacity? Is somebody taking capacity away that's going to put you in a bad situation? Understand their capabilities. Can they make the parts? Can they make the next 2 evolutions of the parts that you're going to have? Understand risk factors. Where are they located? What's their financial situation? You've got to get that deeper understanding. A good example here, one of our customers goes out with a regular survey to gather and report on key risk factors across their direct material suppliers. This provides this customer with an objective view of the risk across their supply chain, and it enables them to go out and manage exceptions and mitigate supply risk. So they just keep a running look, red, yellow, green, on their suppliers and understand where they have to go. That's what you've got to do these days.
I wanted to jump in, Greg, and talk a little bit more about segmenting your suppliers. Some of the things that we heard in the research and from customers in particular is that the more sophisticated you are at segmenting your suppliers, the better you are at contingency planning, capacity planning, and so forth. And if you're going to do a segmentation scheme, it's very important that every time you create a different segment, you're able to explain why that segment is different, how you're going to treat that segment differently, what the goals are for that segment, and how they differ from the other segments. So truly, you're going to have partners. Those are the ones you want to establish long-term relationships that generate significant cost savings. There are many other different types of segments. You have to figure out what's right for you. Most of our customers told us they do have a price segment. They are looking for the lowest price when they bid with those customers because they believe that part, whatever they're providing, is really something that can be made by anyone at a high quality. So focusing on segmentation, getting some help there, it takes a lot of data, it takes a lot of strategy, but that will really help you with all of your supplier relationships.
Great. Before we move off this page, I almost left off the last one, which is pretty important here. The disruptions are becoming more common or more impactful to the business. It's really about your direct material supply chain getting disrupted by something. Wherever you identify risk, make plans to mitigate it with good contingency planning. A lot of leading manufacturers set up dual sourcing arrangements. They have new supplier development programs where they're constantly looking for new suppliers to either take over for somebody or be a backup for somebody who they feel is at risk. That's two ways to mitigate risk. And one final important lesson here is, we talk about finding these strategic suppliers and the important ones, but do not overlook the little guys. The whole bill of material is required to build your products. Okay? The best example I can provide here is the Boeing Dreamliner issue. So the delivery of the very first planes for the Dreamliner line was significantly delayed, not by the engine supplier, not by the landing gear supplier, but by a shortage of aerospace fasteners, basically a commodity in that industry. So all of the parts matter. Look up and down your whole supply chain, across your bill of material, and make sure you're managing risk effectively. Okay, moving on. We're going to move down to the high priority tier of this wedding cake we've got here. First concern, the speed at which things are changing. Okay, cost and risk factors, commodity volatility, we've touched on that already. They're changing more rapidly than ever, and as manufacturers, you have to pick up the pace. We're seeing leading companies increasing the frequency at which they assess their manufacturing as well as their sourcing strategies. They're doing make versus make analysis, make versus buy, buy versus buy, and those things used to happen, those analyses used to happen every couple of years. Some manufacturers are actually doing this annually now to say, are we in the right places? Are we manufacturing in the right places? Are we sourcing in the right places? Now, these types of analyses require a really good, comprehensive fact base so that you make the right decision. So going around and gathering the proper information on cost is really, really important to make the right decisions here with where you're going to go. Onshore, reshore, offshore, make, buy. All that has to be done with a good fact base that supports your decisions. We recommend doing that. Build the right cost templates to support the analyses. Again, finance can help you here. A third concern is a shift from low-cost country sourcing to best-cost country sourcing. What do you mean here, Greg? What I mean is there's a lot of companies that still have an arbitrary objective of having X% of their direct material sourced from low-cost countries. That can absolutely drive the wrong behavior and create a more costly and risky supply chain. These days, it's more important to source from the right suppliers in the right region based on the ultimate manufacturing destination, the total cost, and the relative risk. One of our customers, Whirlpool Corporation, they've been executing a best cost country sourcing strategy to great effect. They've been modifying their manufacturing footprint to optimize costs, as well as position themselves for growth in emerging economies, and they're constantly looking at where's the best cost country to source these parts from. Okay, the next item is inefficient sourcing. We've touched on this, and here's some additional analysis from the market surveys Michael led. The inefficiencies that are out there, people really aren't saying it's my people or it's my processes. It's really technology. So we dug into that some more. We gauge people's satisfaction with their sourcing technology across 9 direct material sourcing activities. They're spelled out here. As you can see, the satisfaction ranged anywhere from 52% to 66%. So it's clear that if you say 80% is the bar you have to clear here, nothing in any of these activities, the technology is coming up short, okay? The reality, as Michael mentioned earlier, is that most manufacturing sourcing teams, whether you've got an indirect-based sourcing tool, an ERP-based sourcing tool, you're still using email and complex spreadsheets. Maybe you're taking those spreadsheets and posting them in an indirect sourcing tool. It's a glorified form of email, okay? You're sourcing the most critical spend for your company using spreadsheets, disparate systems, and people are spending an inordinate amount of their time chasing and manipulating sourcing data required to make sense of it all and make the right sourcing decisions. We like to call it the spreadsheet Olympics, and it's not productive. People want to do a better job. They want to understand total cost better. They want to minimize supply risk, and they want to make the best sourcing decisions. They just don't have the time to do it right. So manufacturers that understand this are investing in better technology that provides capabilities people need to be more productive and to be more strategic in their work. So look at the tools your people have. You've probably optimized your processes. You've probably got really good, sharp people in your sourcing group. Give them the right tools they need to do their job well. Okay, going back to Michael on conflict minerals here.
Yeah, conflict minerals is a very, very interesting topic. And it's one that, scares most sourcing professionals, most engineering departments, because they don't really know how it's going to ultimately impact their product. I think most of you probably know what conflict minerals are. They're basically minerals that are being mined in countries where they're using the proceeds to fund abuse, wars, stuff like that. The key is, and by the way, you have to keep in mind, this is a global issue, and you have to go really country to country to see if there's laws for that particular country that you need to be paying attention to. So it's very important that you partner with legal and compliance here and start determining, what impacts me. In the U.S., there is a first report that is due out May 31st, 2014, and we know many of our clients are in the progress of figuring out how am I going to complete that report. The SEC has provided access to some reports that they liked, and you can probably go down that reporting path. But like every other piece of legislation in our country, in Europe, the legislation is going to change as they see the first report coming in. So what's important to understand about conflict minerals is, one, it can have a tremendous impact on your business. And even if you're not required to report this year, it could become a reporting requirement next year, or in 2015, I should say, which you would start gathering information next year. Two, the people that own your company, whether it's your stockholders, the board of directors, or just the private ownerships, may show up at your door at any time and tell you, I don't want any conflict minerals in my products. All right? This is a reputation thing. This is an ethics issue. This could take on a quick and powerful, this could become a quick, powerful wrecking ball. And you need to be prepared. Basically, what you need to do is understand, when I look at a part, where did that part come from? And it's not just, well, it was made in China. Did China go to the Congo and did they buy materials from that country who has been classified as a conflict minerals country? Because that falls into conflict minerals. So you need to get your suppliers to report to you where they're getting their materials and so forth. And that's going to be very difficult to do in some cases. You have many, many suppliers. Some suppliers are probably on top of this, others not so much. So since this is all a moving target, the most important thing you should remember is there are going to be reporting deadlines. Those reporting, the reporting requirements are going to be about, do conflict minerals touch my product in some way, and in what way, how often, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to have to gather information. When do I gather information? Well, I gather it during the sourcing process, maybe pre-event, during the event, post-event. How can my sourcing tool help me gather information, manage this process? We've talked to clients. Everyone has to turn in a report on May 31st, 2014. That doesn't mean the report's going to be complete. They're going to document who wouldn't give them information. They're going to document who gave them poor information. And then the next round of revision will come to play. All along, maybe the board of directors says, you know, anybody that can't tell us, won't tell us, take them off our list. You don't know what's going to happen. So we're going to share with you some resources to help stay on top of this, but this is an area, even if it doesn't impact you right now, you need to stay on top of. I'm going to turn it back over to Greg, and he's going to talk about some best practices that we see out there that's really allowing companies to get ahead of their competition.
Yeah, so this, I laugh about this slide because I said to Michael, what does good look like? When I was in the consulting business, a wise consultant told me, customers and your clients want to know what good looks like. Michael said, Greg, these people want to know what great looks like, so we changed this slide. So really going to wrap it up here in terms of recommendations just by saying, what are we observing in best-in-class manufacturers and what they're doing with their direct material sourcing? The first point is they understand how direct material sourcing fits into the bigger picture, right? They understand and align their objectives with the greater objectives of the company. They're supportive of the objectives of the company. Hey, we're expanding into a new region. Got it. We're going to find some suppliers for that region. Hey, we need a 3% improvement in gross margins. We're on it. We're going to identify where we can take cost out. Hey, we've got to get 25% more new products launched this year. Great. What do we need to do to help with that? Get us involved earlier in the process. So they're aligned. They make better sourcing decisions, and they do this because they understand total cost. They manage supply risk by understanding their suppliers better, capacity, capabilities, risk, et cetera, and so on. And they more frequently evaluate their sourcing strategies and manufacturing strategies. Where should we make this? Where should we buy the parts for it? They optimize their direct material supply chain and constantly evaluating that. Third point here, they effectively apply technology to streamline their sourcing processes and create capacity. That's what lean is all about. That's what better operations is all about. It's creating capacity where you don't have it today without spending an inordinate amount of money to do that. So create the capacity for their people to be more strategic so they can make better decisions, hit those target margins, help with NPI, help expansion into a new region. Give the people the time to do the job they need to do. Last thing, they anticipate changes in their business, like conflict minerals legislation. They understand what that means for their supply chain, and they stay ahead of the emerging requirements so they don't get caught short. They're constantly looking at what's coming down the line and how are they going to deal with it. And that, I believe, is it.
So before we turn it back over to Joe for the Q&A period, and we're going to be using the Q&A box for that, we did want to provide you with some extra materials that you can use after the webinar. We have a resource center on our website, www.directmaterials.com, and we also have a sourcing savings calculator on the site as well. And this will be a PDF also that's coming to you that you can just click on the links to get to those sites. Also put down the 2 links on the same page for the conflict minerals to get to the SEC Gov site. And then finally, there's a really, really good supply chain white paper on game-changing trends of supply chain. The University of Tennessee is doing a lot of work on supply chain, and they have professors that have been studying this and doing research on it for years. And if you click on that link when you get the documents, you will go to that white paper. And I suggest you kind of look at what the University of Tennessee is doing. We have no relationship with them. We just found their stuff and we read them faithfully because they seem to be right on top of it with very research-oriented findings. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe Lipple.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Greg. Before we get into the Q&A, let me answer the number 1 question. Yes, the slides and a link to the recording will be sent to everyone who attended. As a reminder, you can ask your questions using the Q&A feature in the WebEx toolbar at the top of your screen. Just click the Q&A button and type your question and send it to all panelists. All right, so send your Q&A questions to all panelists. So let's go through the list here. First question, can you elaborate on the concept of best cost country sourcing?
Yeah, best cost country sourcing is maybe a term that not everybody uses, but it's really about just not the lowest cost parts, but the lowest total cost, based on the right, and selecting the suppliers in the right region for where the parts are going to be used. You may choose to source your parts in China for a new manufacturing facility in China because that helps hedge against currency fluctuations. It's really about finding the right total cost to get those parts to the end destination where they're going to go into a manufacturing operation.
Great, Greg. Thank you very much. Next question that came in. We all hear about the need for innovation from our suppliers. How do you go about it?
Well, you can't go to everybody is the first bit of advice, right? I mean, there's so many suppliers to manage. So you have to do it selectively, and I think you need to really look at how do you make that selection. And again, here I'll come back to something I said during the webinar. You need to look at the ones that have the biggest impact either on your spend or on your product. And the other thing I would say is involve your suppliers early. Sourcing needs to get involved earlier with new product introductions, with design changes. Some of the engineering folks don't want you sticking your nose around there. You've got to get involved earlier if they want you to make an impact, and get the suppliers involved earlier as a source of innovation.
All right, thank you, Greg. Next question, this one I think is for Michael. Can you share with us the demographics for your interview subjects?
Yes. I'll go into a little more detail than we cover on the opening slide. We were very fortunate. We did most of our work by phone. It's something I learned a long time ago. Internet research can be a little misleading, and it's easy to ignore. But we did most of our work by phone using a company called Warbuck Research Services. It was U.S.-based. We did do some interviews overseas, but those were U.S. companies with overseas offices. It was spread out around the U.S., all states. We did talk to, when we targeted the people who were VP, director level, and what I call closer to C-level in the manufacturing space. So we weren't interested in really getting down too far down the chain because we wanted to get senior executives positions. And we were very good. I mean, I know a lot of people had doubts, like, why will a VP of supply chain talk to you? Well, they didn't talk to me, first of all. They talked to the research company, and because they're interested in getting this type of feedback back. So most of these companies, all were manufacturers. They were mostly what I call discrete manufacturers, aerospace, computers, anyone who's really making a product that's sold to a company, and there were some consumer durable goods companies as well. But we didn't have a whole lot of food and beverage companies in this particular study who are making just products that end up on the retail store. We were really try to zero in on direct material sourcing. So really we targeted, a national, we figured out who's the right companies, and then we used our database to target those companies.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, last one I've got here in the Q&A panel. You mentioned streamlining your sourcing. Can you be more specific? Greg?
I'll take it, yeah. Again, this comes down to looking at, so you've got the people, then look at the process. Again, most manufacturers have some sort of a lean or continuous improvement Six Sigma capability in their organization, and enlist those people to help you. Look at your processes, find out where the time is being spent, where the value really is being added, and lean down that process as much as possible. We had one customer take their process from 7 steps down to 5, and you know, by combining a number of tasks and taking out some non-value-added tasks. Then automate wherever you can. If you're spending time stitching together spreadsheets so that you can make an analysis and chasing data, that's really not a good use of your time. The results are a good use of your time. But getting to those results, there are faster ways and more efficient ways to do that, to take that work away and to really streamline things by conducting the analysis through automation, having it come to you with the results you're looking to generate and working back from there.
And I think a couple other areas where people have really reinforced, this was the places I was looking for efficiency. Every time they had to do a change order or a change with suppliers, that was individual emails being sent out. Well, what if we could figure out a way, and it's been done with technology, to basically say you create one email and you securely share information one-on-one with these suppliers. That's a tremendous time savings, and Greg talked about our one company to achieve 50% savings per part. That was one of the reasons. And to make it even more crystal clear, because some of our customers have just given us this great feedback on this, imagine following those spreadsheets that you send out, all right? You send them out, they get populated inconsistently, then they send them back. You have to put them together. You have to put them side by side. You have to make an apples to apples. Well, what if the technology, instead of filling in a spreadsheet, they filled in a form that kind of looks like a spreadsheet? And they come through the technology, and on your end, side by side now, already populated, is all the response. And at the end is your target cost, which you entered side by side. And the technology automatically tells you who's above target cost, who's below target cost, who's the best to select for this item, who's not. Now you spend your time, you open the sheet, and you spend your time picking up the phone going, we need to negotiate some things here. You're good on lines 4, 5, 12, and 13. What's the shipping cost? Maybe we should look at my shipping provider, And now you're doing strategic negotiations. You're talking about, well, maybe I can do this if I got a longer term that. You're taking out the manual labor and you're automating it. That's been the wow factors for the people that we've talked to.
Great, thank you. That's all I'm seeing as far as Q&A goes. So I'd like to